country's central bank floated the idea of dumping the greenback as the world's reserve currency, replacing it with an international currency.
Thousands of people gathered to hear Barack Obama deliver key foreign policy speech on his current European tour. His vision for America's place in a new world order.
Returning vets could be a risk to our nation.
We've got to give them a stake in creating the kind of world order that I think all of us would like to see.
And one of the ways it will drive the change is through global governance.
I think a new world order is emerging.
This is a hoax and a scam which is designed to transfer wealth and power from the private sector to the government sector and from the government of the United States to a world government.
And those people who have been yelling, oh, the UN's going to take over global
conspiracy
government.
Theorists.
They've been crazy, but now they're right.
And who got the money? Hundreds and hundreds of banks. Any bank or that has access to the U.S. Federal Reserve's discount.
Tell us who they are.
No.
You know, financial terrorism. They have the ability to tweak the knob.
I am proposing that the Federal Reserve be granted new authority.
Broadcasting live from the dark and cold dungeons deep beneath the KLAV studios in Las Vegas, Nevada. Prepare yourselves to be taken away into another dimension as we now have control over your thoughts, fears, and perspective of the unexplained world you dare not speak of. With your hosts, Lindsay Knight and Michael Knight. Ladies and gentlemen, we now open the gates to the paranormal and beyond.
Broadcasting live from the KLAV studios in Las Vegas, Nevada, this is the Paranormal and Beyond. The New World Order is said to control the wealth of the nations throughout central banks via the issuance of currency. Created in 1913, the Federal Reserve System is the central bank for the United States, which proclaims the fundamental promise of economic stability. However, by getting the most powerful country on the planet to issue fiat money and then subduing the world into using it as a reserve currency is nothing more than sheer genius, but is also a death sentence to the financial industry. When we return, we will discuss the most dominating force on the planet who practically owns the world and everything in it, including you. So get ready to make a permanent withdrawal as we dig deep into the Federal Reserve right here on the Talk of Las Vegas, KLAV 1230 AM.
Your ticket to the unknown is at knightsParanormalResearchSociety.com. UFOs, ghosts, aliens, hauntings, mysterious places and more can be found at knightsParanormalResearchSociety.com. Knights with a K, ParanormalResearchSociety.com. Based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, Knights Paranormal Research Society is owned and operated by the renowned brother and sister team of Michael and Lindsay Knight. Seeing is believing. And at knightsParanormalResearchSociety.com, you're going to believe. Join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight for the Paranormal and Beyond. Join host Michael Knight and Lindsay Knight as they investigate the unexplained and most controversial mysteries of the world. The Paranormal and Beyond, where the paranormal lives on and conspiracies exposed. The Paranormal and Beyond, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight. Brought to you by Knights Paranormal Research Society.com.
Open up your gates, 'cause I can't wait to see the light. And where there is where I walk and stay. make me feel like I've been locked out of hell.
Welcome back to another brand new edition of the Paranormal and Beyond. But first, be sure to check us out at nights. ParanormalResearchSociety.com, where you can link up to all the past shows by simply clicking that button above. That's nights. ParanormalResearchSociety.com. Want to pursue a career in acting? We'll start acting today by logging on to HollywoodBoundActingAcademy.com. That's HollywoodBoundActingAcademy.com. Special shout out to all those listening online through the KLAV1230AM.com website, and all those driving around in the Vegas Valley listening to us on your stereos. I'm your host, Michael Knight. Alongside me, it's your hostess, Lindsay Knight, the radio vigilante, stealing knowledge from the wise and giving it to all you sheeple out there. All right, we got a great show for you today. Lindsay, how are you doing?
I'm always doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great today. The world is crazy. Our government is crazy. And what better topic to do than the Federal Reserve, which I think is the catalyst of all this problem that's going on with the government.
Well, first thing that comes to my mind is the NWO.
Oh, of course. Well, see, they shouldn't have done this, and we're going to get into this later on. But first, let's get into the news.
Topping the news for the Paranormal and Beyond this Monday, September 30th. In official news, the day has come when you see a guy growing a nose on his forehead and it will require no explanation. Doctors in China have grown an entire nose on a man's forehead, but as bizarre as the procedure might sound, plastic surgeons say such transplants are not anything new. The case in China involved a 22-year-old man from Fuzhou who was involved in a car accident and suffered permanent damage to the cartilage in his nose through infection. 9 months ago, his doctors decided to reconstruct the nose on his forehead. Doctors would likely allow the new nose to grow on the man's forehead for several months before they would attempt to transplant it. In order to ensure the structure still had a good blood supply, a component of the nose will remain attached to his forehead for a few weeks, a process that is a little odd to see. It looks like an elephant's trunk that's connecting to his forehead to the nose for a while, and you have to leave that for about a month or so until the blood supply from the face nourishes it enough so that you can disconnect it from his forehead. So there's multiple steps involved that he still has to go through. If all goes well, the man should be able to maintain his senses of smell since the smell receptors are pretty far up the nose. I would anticipate that if they keep this passageway open with the reconstruction, he should be able to breathe normally, and he should have a normal sense of smell as well. Now get this. 2 lovers who officials said have failed to overcome their natural passion were hit by a train in Ukraine while they had sex on the railroad tracks. Russian news had actually reported this. Unidentified 30-year-old something woman died, and her 41-year-old partner lost both his legs in the Saturday morning incident in the city of Zaporizhzhia. In a statement that Russian police had said, the pair were actually supposedly drunk. My girlfriend and I could not overcome our passionate nature and wanted to feel a sense of thrill near a railroad track, the man later stated. The man now faces trespassing charges, and this wasn't the first time lovers have tempted fate with tryst on the tracks. In 2008, both participants were killed by a freight locomotive in South Africa, and after they ignored train whistles, the man was found still wearing a condom. Reporting the news for the Paranormal and Beyond, this is Lindsay Knight.
Well, if the STD didn't get you or the train, at least you were wearing the condom, right? And the guy with the nose, mind you, that nose was planted upside down, so how would you shower with something like that?
Well, let's just say that if it was raining outside, he would actually drown.
Oh, pa-ching. All right, let's move on to our main topic, and it's about the Federal Reserve. Now, look what's going on with our government today. We got a government shutdown going on, and basically the government can't sustain itself because it's run out of money. If you ask 100 people out there, where do money come from? 98% will tell you it comes from the government. It does not. Money is owned by a private company, just like your shoes, your sneakers, your jackets. All right, it's a product of the central banking, which is the Federal Reserve. And a lot of people don't also realize this, but the IRS is also a privateer company.
Well, let's just say that the Federal Reserve is really not a part of the federal government, like, 98% of the population, of course, states. It's actually a subcontractor for monetary policy.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the United States government. So in layman's terms, what happens is, if there's a war that breaks out, what happens is they will go to the Federal Reserve and say, hey, can we borrow money to fund this war for their tanks and weapons and all this? And they will get the money. However, there is a interest that needs to be paid back to the Federal Reserve. And if they do not get the money they seek, And remind you, this is a private company that says nothing. This is a separate thing from the government. They will start taking away assets. And to this point, they don't care about money. They just want assets and power and control over this. So what's going on with the United States and our government falling apart, the Federal Reserve, who's in there laughing, as well as other countries, looking at how sad the United States have become, you know, for this. First, we're talking about attacking Syria, and now it's like we can't even have a dollar attack anybody.
Well, this hence is the national debt that we're in right now. And, you know, back in 2008 when, of course, the U.S. had crashed, supposedly we were $3.3 trillion in debt when it actually came out that Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont put a provision in the financial reform forcing the government to actually state, you know, and pretty much come clean and say that, hey, you know what, we are $9.9 trillion in debt,
and
not
now
3.3.
it's like, I think, $16 trillion, and all this money's owed to the Federal Reserve. So you have this privateer bank who's basically controlling the United States, and think of it like that. I know a lot of people out there are like, wait a minute, I thought that the government makes the money. No, it's not. If you look at any tender note, it says Federal Reserve on top. On top of it, it's actually a product of a privateer who, basically the richest people in the world, who has their finger in everything. The government is basically powerless to them. They control, they fund wars, they have the money in oil and everything. When you hear about the Bilderberg meetings, these are the top people in industry, in big business, who goes to these events and basically come up with a strategy on how to raise, you know, more debt, how to, you know, just raise everything in general and pretty much have control and crashing anything. They can crash the stock market. And it's just mind-blowing on how much control they have. And this goes all the way back to the 1600s, before it even came to U.S. soil, when this was thought up. And it was thought up by a bad idea. We talked about the Titanic last Friday, and that blew a lot of people away. This will blow you away because we talked a little bit about how the Federal Reserve had a little role playing in that because of Guggenheim, Strauss, and Astor, who were tragically killed in that. But these guys were big proponents against the Federal Reserve back in 1912, and look what happened to them.
Well, I don't know if you want to go back and talk about how this all started and was created.
Yeah,
Well,
let's do that.
Let's take it back to 1694 because a central bank was already existence in England.
Before we go further, let's talk about a central bank and what it is. Central bank is basically the main bank. Let's say it's the main branch of Washington Mutual. And then you have these subsidiary countries, not countries, but companies underneath. Okay, that's why when you go to a bank, you always see FDIC backed. Basically, they're backed by the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is the main bank and controls all the money. These little banks borrow against the Federal Reserve. Therefore, you get the, you get the interest, rates and stuff like that. If you had money and you put it in there and you were living on the interest alone, it's because other people are borrowing your money. So it's all interest that
Well,
you
in
get.
reality, the idea of a central bank is to enslave the people of the country to a debt money system, which is what has happened, of course. And then you continue to collect and take that money continuously, which just covers the interest.
Exactly. I mean, interest alone, we are talking about 1600s, and we're talking about the richest family in the world, basically, who already had trillions of dollars in assets during that time.
Well, then we're talking about the Rothschilds.
Exactly.
Which they had tens of trillions of dollars back in 1694. I'm talking about old money. And they're the ones who started the central bank system in England and then took it over to the U.S. in, cahoots with other rich and wealthy, powerful people as well.
Big businessmen who they can put in their pocket to basically get everybody together to manipulate basically the country. Because if you have control of all goods and all money, any president will be powerless to what you got.
Well, I do want to, say a quote that Baron Nathan Mayer Rothschild, which was, back in 1694, who was, of course, the main, guy, one of the Rothschilds. This is a quote that he actually stated back in the day. I care not what what puppet is placed upon the throne of England to rule the empire in which the sun never sets? The man that controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply. Meaning that even if there is a
elected
king or queen, it doesn't matter because he controls all the money in Europe.
Well, that's what's going on here. And see, people don't realize the president and the government to this day, you all seen on TV, is very powerless. I mean, they don't have enough money to sustain the government. So when they consider a government shutdown, they're shutting down the stuff they don't really need and keeping only what they need. The Federal Reserve has already cut them off. They took a lot of assets from them already. And I think the United States already can't borrow from China. They're so much in debt. This is where I get to, okay, the whole thing, if you know the history, and let's start with the history so we can start talking about the current Syria war and what was supposedly probably planned. But let's go up now from getting to from the creation of it.
Well, actually, it started a little bit before that, and I'm not going to talk about England because we just pretty much covered this whole 1694 and their central bank England. But what took place in the United States was, back in the 1700s, Americans actually won the political independence, but Alexander Hamilton at the time wanted a central bank. So he wanted something like this. It was Jefferson who lobbied against it, saying it was not good, especially for the Constitution, and he didn't want anything like that. Now, it took place, though. Central bank was formed in 1781, which was called the Bank of North America, patterned after the Bank of England, which the colonists did not want at all. So when 1783 it took place, in 1791 it was scrapped because the colonists said, we don't want something like this. We want to have our own private, banks, money that we can do for ourselves. We don't want to have one banking system. Then we go to 1910. We're talking about Jekyll Island. Jekyll Island was an island right off the coast of Georgia, and this was actually owned by J.P. Morgan Chase. Okay, and we all know about J.P. Chase. He's very, very wealthy.
Oh, speaking about J.P. Morgan, if you ever played Monopoly, the character with the black top hat and glasses and handlebar mustaches is modeled after J.P. Morgan. Just a fun fact.
And we are playing, just like the game of Monopoly is exactly what we're doing in real life. Well, in November 10th, the biggest and the wealthiest people, and the biggest prize of all that they wanted to actually come up with was the Federal Reserve. They had a secret meeting, and this consisted of 10 of the wealthiest and the biggest conglomerates in the whole world, pretty much. And they
sort of like your Bilderberger meeting today.
Exactly, and
they would meet at Jekyll Island, and this would be like a only place to get invited to this place is to have generational wealth,
and we're talking,
not rich. Wealth
we're talking about
passed down.
We're talking about the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, J.P. Morgan Chase, Warburgs. We're talking about the highest of the high. And they decided to have this meeting and say, hey, you know what? We want to have one central banking system here where we can pretty much control the money and the power of all the people.
Well, not only that, they made their monies off wars because, back in the Napoleon Wars, the brothers would back both sides, and this is how they'd make their money because they would borrow against them and then get them for the interest. So they needed a war to happen in America, and obviously we know what happened, going to 1914, but before that, like you said, you had the big tycoons in industry having this meeting, but they had 3 guys who were wealthy as well that was against this whole thing because they knew that having a central bank and not having their privateers with, their own banks would just destroy everything because that's too much control for one monopoly of power of people. And who are these 3 people?
Well, we're talking about Astor, Guggenheim, and Isidore, who actually went down with the supposedly Titanic, and I'm going to say the Olympic, but they went down. These are 3 of the wealthiest people. Now, mind you, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, and J.P. Morgan, including with a couple other people, had 1/6 of the world's money.
Yeah, they had a lot.
They had a lot. Guggenheim, Isidore, and Astor had the other half. So they were going to fight them tooth and nail to go against this. They didn't want this at all because they said this would just devastate and cripple the country. And, of course, the whole thing hatched up with the Titanic, and they all died.
Exactly,
so
a plot.
Now there's nothing to fight them.
Yeah, and after the sinking of the Titanic.
That happened in 1912 and 1913. Mind you, 1910 is when they plotted this. 1911 and 12 is when the Titanic sunk, that whole thing went on. 1913 is when the Federal Reserve took place. Okay, so now we have that taking into effect. We have President James Garfield, who actually quoted, "It must be realized that whoever controls the volume of money in any country is absolutely master of all industry," which is exactly what is going on, okay, with the Federal Reserve. Now, in 1914, World War I started. And
as planned.
And of course, everybody who knows whenever there is a war, you're going to need money to fund this war.
And where would you get it from? You'd get it from the central bank.
Exactly.
The one who holds all the money.
Now the Federal Reserve says, we need to concoct a scheme where the government is going to need our money in order to fund the war. And that's exactly what happened. The government went ahead, took money from the Federal Reserve, saying, hey, you know what, we'll go ahead and borrow this money and we'll pay you back, no problem, which is exactly what didn't happen. U.S. went bankrupt. Well, let's just start from the Roaring 20s, okay, because we all know about the Great Depression. That pretty much sank everything. On October 1929, the Federal Reserve withheld money from circulation so bills could not be paid, simultaneously calling in all their loans. So after the war, they said, we want all our money back plus the interest. They pulled the plug, which actually caused the stock market to crash. In 1932, 80% of the stocks plummeted. The Great Depression took place. Winston Churchill said, I know who wields the real power now, which means it's the Federal Reserve, because they took their money back, and hey, look what happened.
Mind you, the Federal Reserve, once again, is not a government entity. Neither is the IRS.
When the FED, when the FED wanted to take control of their money and get the interest back after the war had, ended, the U.S. government said, we don't have enough money in circulation for people to pay their bills and to give out loans, what have you, et cetera, for people to buy food. So they said, you know what, they control everything. They control the interest in the stocks, what have you. So they pretty much crashed it. And that's what happened until 1938. The U.S. went bankrupt. It took 25 years from 1913 all the way up into 1938 when the United States already went bankrupt.
Yeah, and they still are, as
pretty
we can
much.
see.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's the whole thing. They built this. If we look back in history, going back to Abraham Lincoln, who had the silverbacks, basically you had money that was backed up not by a big central bank, but you had it backed up by gold and silver. And Abraham Lincoln wanted to do that and continue that. And look what happened to him. History repeats itself because it happened again with JFK, who also tried to bring back the greenbacks and actually printed a lot of them, but never went out in circulation. But then he was assassinated as well. And then we had Andrew Jackson, who tried to do that as well, but was a failed attempt.
Well, people, it's true because, you hear a lot of people, that say, why doesn't the government just print their own money? There is a printing press, and we've all, seen it on TV. There is a printing press, obviously, that makes the money, but that does come from the Federal Reserve. Pretty much, it's just... And no money comes from them because it's just made from thin air, you know what I mean? But they do charge, when they give it to the government and the government borrows it, there is interest on those bills that they pass on to them. Now, President Kennedy did, in fact, print $4 billion of interest-free money.
Bad move.
There is a lot of conspiracies saying that he was not killed, from the connection for the mafia. But it was actually due to him printing out $4 billion of interest-free
greenbacks.
Exactly. Same thing that Lincoln tried to do, and look what happened.
Government
Lincoln,
actual own money. This is money printed by the government, not by a privateer like the Federal Reserve. And that's a no-no. We all seen Saddam Hussein. We all know about the war and what happened with that. The whole 9/11 thing, he was printing up his own money and brought it into circulation. We all seen, what was it, dinar, his money? And basically, that's a no-no. You cannot print your own money. Like you just brought up a good thing. Can the government just print their own money? They've tried. But money has a value now, and it's been in circulation by the Federal Reserve. Not only that, the Federal Reserve has a lot of banks in Switzerland and the UK. And the UK today basically tells the United States what to do. It's probably unbelievable to a lot of people out there, but let me break it down like this. Every time there's a war, Desert Storm, or anything like that, we always have our ally, the British, with us, okay? And then we go to war. However, when we were going to do the Syria thing, the UK backed down, didn't want to do it. We weren't going to go in alone because that was not the right thing to do. If the UK went in, we would have went in, of course, with them. So now look what happens. The United States can't make money off the war no more because the people are waking up and they're not going to let this slide anymore.
Absolutely, and there's still people out there who do not understand that. You know, the United States has been mortgaged to the bankers, the Federal Reserve.
Unbelievable, right?
They print money out, loan it, and goes into circulation, and then of course, people are strapped with more debt.
Exactly. So this is what a lot of old presidents went through. Not, Andrew Jackson didn't want to pass this. It's because of situations like this. It's just too much power. You're talking about currency here that everybody needs, everybody wants. To control that is way more powerful than controlling religion itself. Not only this money buys everything. Federal Reserve is more powerful than the president or the White House altogether. They can buy presidencies, senators. When you hear, the business is too big to fail, this is a business that's too big to go to jail as well. Wow, that's all right. But people don't realize this when it comes to money. We are dealing with something that is very deadly, and there is a deadly past tied to the Federal Reserve. It was, when they really passed this was on Christmas Day when everybody was gone. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
They passed the bill on Christmas Day. I think it was 1913, late December, while everybody was on vacation. Surprisingly enough, they do that today.
Well, how do you feel about paying your taxes? Because there's two things that are guaranteed, death and taxes, and we hear that numerous occasions.
I don't like paying it, but guess what? You don't have to.
Well, let me tell you this, though. The United States is paying about, and I'm talking about you and I and everybody else in this country, we're paying about $400 billion a year to the IRS, which is a collection agency for the Federal Reserve.
Okay, now listen to that. The IRS has nothing to do with the government. It is a separate entity like the Federal Reserve, but it is hired by the Federal Reserve. This is their own police, basically.
Exactly what I said, a collection agency for the Federal Reserve.
So you're paying your taxes to a private company, not the government. They scare you with jail, prison time, and all this.
Well, let me explain this to you. The people who enacted the Federal Reserve started the IRS. The Federal Reserve buys us debt with money they printed from nothing. Like I said earlier, from nothing, then charges the U.S. taxpayers interest. That government actually had to create income tax to pay the interest expense to the FED. We had to do that. Here's another thing. The IRS was actually never legally passed.
It wasn't. It was never signed into law.
Section 8 of the Constitution, not one state legally ratified the 16th Amendment, making income tax legal. Utah actually doesn't they don't prosecute. The IRS quit prosecuting taxpayers because jurors' verdict was not guilty.
Well, first of all, it is unconstitutional, all right? And a lot of people out there, because of how history has conformed an individual to think one way, now everybody in their head is thinking they have to pay taxes. But let's look at who you're paying taxes to. It has nothing to do with the government. You are helping the government pay back its own debt. It's created by getting the Federal Reserve together. All right, that's the whole thing. Who was that? Andrew Jackson's tombstone actually says on it, "I have killed the banking industry," or something like that. He knew he made a mistake and would regret it for the rest of his life, and actually did. All right, we're going to take a quick break and come back and educate you more on the government and money and what's really going on. And today, what we're seeing that is coming out that's reflecting the past. And basically, are we headed for another Great Depression, just made by the government and really has nothing to do with the American people? When we return right here on the Paranormal and Beyond.
Let's hear your ghost stories at 731-1230. That's 731-1230. The Paranormal and Beyond continues after this. Join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight for The Paranormal and Beyond. Join host Michael Knight and Lindsay Knight as they investigate the unexplained and most controversial mysteries of the world. The Paranormal and Beyond, where the paranormal lives on and conspiracies exposed. The Paranormal and Beyond, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight. Brought to you by Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com. Your ticket to the unknown is at Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com. UFOs, ghosts, aliens, hauntings, mysterious places, and more can be found at Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com. Knights with a K, Paranormal Research Society.com. Based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, Knights Paranormal Research Society is owned and operated by the renowned brother and sister team of Michael and Lindsay Knight. Seeing is believing. And at Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com, you're going to believe.
Oh, the Federal Reserve isn't federal at all. It isn't even close to being constitutional. It's fraudulently shoved this country up against the wall. Oh, the Federal Reserve isn't federal at all.
All right, welcome back to the Paranormal and Beyond. If you are just tuning in, we are talking about the Federal Reserve. Be sure to check us out at Knight's Paranormal Research Society.com. And also, if you have an idea for a future show for us to talk about, send us an email at theparanormalandbeyond@yahoo.com. All right, let's get back into this and talk about the control of the Federal Reserve itself.
Well, okay, so if the government, let's just say today, okay, this is what pretty much happens. If the government runs a deficit, which we are in a major, major deficit, obviously, the Federal Reserve prints dollars throughout the U.S. still. Okay, so they're still printing money, even though they did cut us off in a sense, because that's why we have, what's going on probably, tomorrow. What they do is they buy back the debt, and the dollars are circulated into the economy. Now, in 1992, taxpayers paid the Federal Reserve $286 billion in interest on debt. The Fed purchased by printing money virtually cost-free. 40% of our personal federal income taxes pays that interest. And this is what we were just talking about with the IRS, So, I mean, that's one thing that's going on today.
See, before even the Federal Reserve was enacted, people had their own private banks. And these banks would only charge interest to the person borrowing money. Now you have banks who have to pay interest to the Federal Reserve. That's why, let's say you have $2 million you want to withdraw from any specific bank. They will tell you to come back and wait because they need to gather that money together and get that money to give to you. Everything has interest, and we are living now in an interest world, not interest-free.
But see, we should not be paying interest on our own currency.
See, but this is what people don't realize is that it's one big circle game to the Federal Reserve. You have the government who today is trying to get out of their own mess by borrowing too much money from other countries, but the majority of it from the Federal Reserve, and are trying to find a way to get it back. But right now they have no leg to stand on. And where are they going to go? Back to the Federal Reserve and ask for more money?
Well, under the Federal Reserve Act, the bankers control our economy, and the Federal Reserve controls interest rates and the amount of money in the economy. So they pretty much do own us. They really do.
They do. And here's the thing. Okay, the Federal Reserve, there's a lot of tycoons of industry who own this. Like I said, it's a private entity, has nothing to do with the government. The IRS is their collection agency, who is as well a private company. But you have people in there who own the oil fields. You have people in there who own the media. You have people on there who own gold, diamonds, all the diamond fields, all the oil fields, everything. These are the guys basically who control the world. They can do whatever they want. If they want to sink the economy tomorrow, they will.
Well, okay. Let me just say this as well, because, majority of pretty much anything like a bank, any kind of banking industry, they get audited. Okay. They always have to be audited to make sure that the books are correct. There's only 2 places that I know that have not been audited, which has, since it's open. That is Fort Knox, never been audited, and the Federal Reserve has never been audited.
You would think so,
Not to mention
right?
this, Congress raised our taxes 56 times, but only balanced their books once.
Well, the whole thing of raising our
Or
taxes...
balanced their budget.
Well,
Sorry.
that's the whole thing. You think they would be doing that with the amount they borrow from so many people, but they don't. The IRS, they keep track of the Federal Reserve. They can run money more better than our government, and it's just sad seeing our, Obama today on TV basically look like a deer in the headlights. There's, he's still trying to pass Obamacare, and what's going to happen tomorrow when you have all these people who are now looking for a new insurance carrier that don't want Obamacare, and all these businesses, how many people are talking about laying off all across the country?
Oh, a million people.
That's
so far.
Okay, we're coming into another depression. Now, they said it's not state or not, but if you do not purchase the Obama insurance, you need to go look for insurance on the outside, even if you have a job or not. If you don't get insurance, you will get fined. Second offense, you will do jail time or prison time. Here we go again with another law to scare you, as we talked about the IRS. People are so scared not to pay the IRS because they're going to face jail time. That is totally BS. All right?
It's just like, okay, Social Security, for instance, and I brought this up earlier, and this is a good point. I mean, you have to earn points from working in order to get your Social Security. Let's just say you get injured or something happens tragically and you don't have enough points, or you do have enough points. Yes, you can opt out early and collect on your Social Security at a young age. But if you do not get enough points by working so many years, then you will not get Social Security at all. But here's the thing. Even if you don't get Social Security and because you didn't get enough points, when you were working for, let's just say 10 years, but you still did not create enough points, they took money from your Social Security.
And they will continue to take money from you.
But you don't get that back. So you're just borrowing from your own money. But where does that money go to? Obviously, yes, you're going to get your money back at a certain age. But if you don't get enough points, all that money that you invested in, you're not going to get back regardless.
So it's like this. Let me get this straight. The government is borrowing from the Federal Reserve as much as they can, to pay for whatever they want. The Federal Reserve doesn't care about the human race and the people. They're after their money, after the assets upon which people borrows from and wants it back. I can't even fathom what assets has the United States given up already to the Federal Reserve.
Well, wouldn't you want to predict the future? I mean, it would be great, right? Inflation, deflation, people would want to know when to buy or sell stocks, But, of course, the federal profits from economic disasters like depression, they can manipulate the interest in the system and the stocks, so they know when and where it's going to happen.
Exactly. They know what's going to happen. Like we talked about the Bilderberg meetings. And one thing about these meetings that gets me, you take 100 NFL players or movie stars and you lock them in a room for 3 days, the press will be all over that place trying to figure out what they're doing. However, you take 100 of these wealthiest people and presidents and biggest tycoons in industry and put them in a room for 3 days, there's no press whatsoever. You would think this would be the biggest coverage to find out what's going on. But like I said, they control the press. This is where I say the whole time machine and the real psychics are at work, is in this place debating on what to do with our country. Whether or not it's to put millions of Americans out of jobs, they don't care. They have no regards for that. Look what's going on.
Well, look, what's going on now is that bankers are actually pushing for a one world government and cashless society. You've heard that they don't want to have cash anymore circulating in our economy.
That's going to be really hard to do. They were trying to push together the American euro.
Here's the thing.
You see how the euro plays because European. This is where it came from. the people in Europe are basically in control of the United States. I'm sorry to say that, but if you do your homework and look, they are the biggest contributors of the Fed ever.
Not to mention everybody fears the IRS. We're all scared of the IRS. Now, we're talking about cashless society. Okay, computers control our money via computers are gone. Everything fails. Let's just say that you have, you've heard of it.
Well, first
you lose everything in the system.
I would believe it because right now we're dealing with fiat money. This is something that it's not tangible. Okay, the money you hold in your hand is not yours. The reason, remember, they took away people's gold before to scare them into getting into the whole American money?
In the 1930s.
Because back in the days, all right, if we go back in the days, we had several states had their own money. They'd make their own money. If you had Wisconsin, they would have their Wisconsin dollar and, and so forth like that. So it was hard to control because everybody had their own tender at that time. So to control everything, and like I said before, money used to be backed by gold. And you had, silverbacks and all that. But then government started taking people's gold and money and taking it for itself. So then your money would really have no backing to it at all.
It's funny you say that because, people start talking. There's like, okay, well, why don't we just get the money from Fort Knox? Well, apparently there is no money in Fort Knox. We used that up a long time ago.
Exactly. That's the whole thing. The government has its own debt besides the Fed, all right, and what it owes to it.
Well, they're dealing with their own business on the
side.
They
have their side deals
which is like with China.
Yeah, they need to generate their own money. And it's sad to say it's the American dollar, which is the Federal Reserve privately owned note. That's the product they need to get because right now it's been the norm for a long time. You can't just stop the dollar because people who have investments and money in the bank and wake up the next day and their millions isn't worth nothing. It'd be chaos. So somehow you got to find a way to either generate the money back and come out the debt, which I don't think will ever happen unless you blow up I'm not even saying it because that's I won't get shot. But anyways, you have to dig your way out of this. And it's hard when you have an entity and a monopoly right now that has control of every single thing we do in our life.
Well, the problem is that, apparently we were getting better. Supposedly we were rising back to the top after this crash in 2008.
Yeah.
And we just fixed it. Everything supposedly fixed itself.
Let's look at history now and what's going on today, all right? Basically, we're getting dangled the carrot in front of us. And you've seen the world hasn't been right since the Great Depression.
Well, this is a vicious cycle that is repeating itself over and over again.
So we've had government shutdowns before, all right? And this is a way of basically the Fed pulling the plug on the money and stealing everything that you have invested in for that period of greatness, of, ooh la la, everything's so good. This is what the government does, all right? Right now, we're at a peril time. We thought everything was great. Obama was like, oh, the jobs gone up. The housing market is finally getting great. This is what happens. Guess what people start doing? Investing their money, their entire savings into all these companies because the economy is growing. And guess what happens later on? They pull the plug.
That's
just
exactly
like
what.
that.
See, that's what they did in the 20s with the Great Depression.
Everything
which
you,
is
everything
hence
you
the
saved,
stock market crash.
everything you saved, and everything you bought, any investment you did is now worthless. And guess what they're going to do? Maybe 6 months down the road, they're going to plug that plug back in, and everything's going to get so great, and you have to fight and work your way up.
See, I don't know if this is going to put a dent in our economy or our society with this government shutdown because it's going to be national parks. There's going to be certain businesses that are going to close.
Obama said this today in a statement. He's like, "Yeah, government office will still stay open, and these people will practically work for free and not know when they're going to get paid." Really? These people aren't going to come to work because they're going to looking for a job at Burger King or something like that. You have to look at it from all sides now.
But what is people supposed to do? That's the main concern that is going on right now.
Look what's
what are
happening.
People supposed to do?
Because of the government's own mistake, the American people have to suffer for it. We are in a yo-yo messing with these guys.
Well, people don't know whether to put their money in or to take it out because they don't know if it's going to be pulled again, which is exactly what happened.
Why do you see people trading their money on for gold? Because gold and silver will always keep their value. If the dollar drops and you have gold and silver, you're in a good standing position. You know what I mean? It's tradable. This is how money used to be. Remember gold coins, silver coins? Because it was more tangible. People are running around with monopoly money in their pocket practically. That's what it is. This is money that has no backing to it whatsoever. It's given to you and it could be taken away as quick as given. When you had silverbacks, greenbacks, you can trade them in for gold. You can't trade this in for nothing.
Now, the government still has some money. Obviously, they do. But, I mean, not enough for the economy.
Just enough to flip, to regain some kind of government back. Now you ask yourself, why is the government the biggest drug dealers in the world? They have their side businesses going on. And I'm sorry to say this, but I know the government doesn't like what we're talking about. But, I mean, people need to wake up, and this is what's going on. We've lost control of our own independence in the sense of being privateers in this industry financially. You can go out there and build your white picket fence, the American dream, but you know what? You're going to get it taken away by the government.
You know, it's
by a private person who's basically robbing you of your rights that you built and worked and bled.
It's a sad situation because there's people out there, those million and plus some people that are going to lose their jobs because of this government shutdown, which these people will probably have no idea, you know, that this was even going to take place. And this could be you tomorrow.
Exactly. See, you read a quote, right? How it didn't matter if there was an elected puppet on there, and they're basically enslaving us. Because like I said in the intro, you know, they basically control you. And everything they do, they can make your life it's just hell.
I'm going to read you one more quote, and this actually came from Thomas Jefferson. I place economy among the first and most important virtues, and public debt as the greatest of dangers. To preserve our independence, we must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what's happening, though.
And basically, I'll break it down. Government is borrowing money from the Fed, all right, Federal Reserve, and from China and other countries. They're out here trying to start a war because war is profitable. It's more profitable to these bankers because they lend out money. It doesn't matter to the enemy or friendly. They'll fund both sides of the war.
That's exactly what happened, though, in the 1800s during the Civil War. They were funding both. The Rothschilds, both brothers, were funding the South and the North.
Exactly. Napoleon thought he was going to win, but no. And this is just control. It's one big monopoly game piece. And these are what these people, they're not, at this point in their time, it's not money they want. It's the power, control, and the assets of people who has reneged in paying their money owed to these giant businessmen.
Well, we always hear, you know, the saying, let the economy fix itself.
That's not going to happen. Absolutely not. The only thing, see, people are waking up. That's why it's getting harder now for the government to start passing laws. You know, what we're seeing here with the government shutdown is basically a kiddie game. You know, Republicans don't want to pass Obamacare, so Democrats are going to pout and shut down the government. It's ludicrous what's going on. And at the same time, guess who has to pay for it? Not only in taxes, but losing their jobs is the American people.
And not to mention everything is going up in price and people can't afford to pay it.
And why is it going up? It's going up because the government needs your tax dollars to pay for this private entity, which has nothing to do with you. You're not borrowing money from them. That's the whole thing.
Like I said earlier, we should not have to pay interest on our own currency, but that is exactly what we're doing. We're paying to the IRS.
Okay, here's the thing. If there was like Strauss, Guggenheim, and Astor, that's why they were against this. If there was no central bank today, there'd be no debt. I promise you that there'd be no debt. Because any independent bank, which is privately owned by a family or a corporation, if they don't have the money, they'll either borrow it from a bank and create their own debt, not a national debt, their own debt. And if they can't pay it, they'll close shop. And that's it. Debt would stop right there. They'd figure it out. Our government won't do that because they're like, gimme.
Well, look at all the banks now. You hear FDIC insured. That's because they have to report to another bank.
Exactly.
So it's okay. Yeah.
So here's the thing. If we did not have the Federal Reserve, people would have their own private banks. You know, our own separate entities can create their own money, which can govern more profitably and more smartly to their own people. Back in the days, people had their own money. This is how they did things. But then you had these rich people in industry. If you're going to control somebody, you can either control their religion, the money, or everything. And this is what these people do. And a lot of people don't realize, who they're paying their taxes to. You have people that's like crying about, oh, I owe this much in taxes. Ask yourself why. You made that money fair and square.
Everybody says we owe taxes to the government. It's not going to the government. It's going to the Federal Reserve.
Exactly. Money just spins around. And guess who's laughing? The Federal Reserve. They're controlling everything. Like I said, they go after the assets of whoever they are, lending money out to.
Well, that's what's happening right now, because if the government can't pay back this deficit, which obviously they cannot, and they keep borrowing and printing more money out. I mean, the dollar amount is going lower in value, obviously.
And what's scary is how long is this going to go for till the government can get their act together? It's not the American people. We're the ones suffering, and you have people out of jobs who can't feed their babies, who are getting evicted because we have our so-called powerful government who's the almighty know-it-all controlling our lives. And this is what's so scary that people need to realize. You don't want them to control every aspect of our life. They can't even control the presidency. And that's their job. It's just to do that. They can't even do that. And look how much help they have. They have a whole army, no pun intended, and they still can't balance their own budget. But then you have the Federal Reserve, who's out there laughing all the way to all the banks.
All the way to the bank. Oh, yes, absolutely, they are.
And, people need to go out there. Look on the tax issues, all right? We've lost control of the whole, white picket fence, American dream. There's no such thing no more. Like if you were Oprah and had all her money, it's not a good thing. Yes, you could buy everything, but you got to pay a lot in taxes.
Well, and remember now, too, that the rich have to pay higher taxes as well.
Exactly. So it's
not really the rich get richer anymore.
Well, that's the whole thing for the Federal Reserve.
The rich has to pay higher taxes.
The Federal Reserve was enacted to take money from the poor and the middle class and distribute it to the wealthy. That's like the whole backwards Robin Hood thing. So very unconstitutional.
And the government bid into it.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, yeah, like I read you. They thought, the whole thing was the fundamental promise of economic stability. Does it look like it's working? No, and it's too late to get out of it because you got to pay these people back, or we're just going to start living this cycle over and over and over again.
It's a sad mess. Real quick, it's a sad mess that when you go to get your taxes and then you say you owe taxes and you paid out taxes as well.
No, you make a lot of money fair and square, and then you owe taxes after you've been paying for taxes.
Doesn't make sense.
Government likes that because it's like more debt off their hands. But you're only hitting the tip of the iceberg and helping them out because they're drowning. They're drowning. But it's going to be very, very interesting tomorrow to see what really gets passed and if we even see things getting passed, because nowadays they're not doing that. But like I said, do your research on the Federal Reserve and the income tax IRS agenda. And, this could be the whole separation between your family having a prosperous life, or you guys living out in the streets because of the government's decision. Not yours, the government. All right? That's our show for you today. I hope you were enlightened. And remember, if you're out there and need some money, I don't know what to say. Just start selling something and make your own Federal Reserve because you deserve it. See you back here Wednesday. Take care, everybody.